The real thing you should be asking yourself when you're making your investor pitch deck is, what is the question the investor has? People don't want to hear about your cinematography necessarily. Like that's not what it
Yeah.
is. But for a private investor and a financier, what is the question they're really asking?
Welcome to Off the Lot, the podcast for filmmakers building careers outside the studio system.
We're your hosts, Ken Kabatoff and Anthony Furey, and this is where we break down what it really takes to get indie films made.
Let's dive in. All right, we're back. Anthony, hello. How's it going, sir?
I am doing fantastic. How are you on this fine morning, Ken? What's going on in your life?
Yeah, just a little bit, just in post-production on this little feature called Remnant. No, things are going great. I mean, I've been in the mix stage for the last week. We mixed all of last week. We finished up on Monday of this week. We did like a final playback, and that's been such a great process. I love the sound work before, like just in general on my short films, but doing sound on a feature, it's a totally different world. I mean, the mix stage itself is just this beautiful theater. It's a massive theater, and we're mixing on a Dolby Atmos theater. We're not actually mixing a Dolby Atmos mix yet because that's super, super expensive. And if we're lucky enough to get a great distribution deal and the distributor wants to release the movie with Dolby Atmos, they usually just go back and pay for that. That's what happened with Obsession. So, for example, they just didn't have the money to mix Dolby Atmos off the bat. But when Focus picked it up, they actually mixed it at the same mix stage that we did all of our sound design and mixing for Remnant. And huge shout out to the folks at Maverick Post Group, because they are phenomenal. They have a great track record, and Gregor, our re-recording mixer and sound supervisor, I mean, he just did Backrooms, and again on the same stage that we're mixing Remnant. So we have a great team of like sound designer, ADR, Foley artists, everybody, and it was a really, really cool process. What's interesting too to me about sound design is that as a director, it's like one of the only instances, I mean, besides being on set and directing actors, but it's just this moment where you can just say, well, let's just do this. And instantly you know if it works or not. And you get to see it on a theater screen. So you really just know, like, this is how the audience is going to perceive this moment. And instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just make tweaks on the fly. And so you have a lot of power that way. And it was a really good learning experience as well, just in terms of, temp sound, temp music versus the final mix. Because now we have all of our original music in place. We have all of the original sound in place that our sound design team put in there. And so I'm hearing things for the first time, and like, it's so much better. It's so much better than what we had in the temp mix, right? Like while we're editing, because you're just pulling from like generic libraries as you're putting this movie together, right? But what was very interesting was, like, in the edit, we would say have a spot where there was like temp score. And we maybe put temp score there because the sound design that we did ourselves maybe wasn't strong enough. And so this moment wasn't landing properly for whatever reason. And then we got into the mix stage, and the sound design team was so good that the scene sounded so good. And I was like, oh, we don't need score for this anymore. So we actually ended up pulling a lot of score out of the movie. And, it's kind of this catch-22 where you don't need the score, but it was also good that we had the score there written just in case we did need it. And so I had to kind of apologize to our composer. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, we're pulling a bunch of your music out, and he gets it. He's totally fine with it. The thing that hurt a little bit though was we did get a bunch of cues recorded with the Budapest Orchestra. And unfortunately, one of the scenes that we pulled the score completely out was something that the orchestra had recorded. But it just looked, the scene worked so much better dry with just sound design, and it was so much scarier. And there are just all these moments where things just were scarier dry. And like, the tension is in the silence, and we know that about horror, right? And so it just really, really worked here. So this is my very long-winded way of saying I love sound design. I had a blast. The movie sounds amazing. I can't wait for people to hear it. It is definitely a big, fun, loud theater movie. This is not meant to be watched on your parents' television with shitty speakers and motion blur and all this other crap. This is, you got to go to the theater to see this film. It's so much fun.
Note to the streamers out there that when they try to pick up your film, it will still sound okay in the movie. You just want to see it in the theater.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Netflix, if you're going to buy my movie, it's going to sound great.
It'll
It's going
sound
to sound
fine at
fantastic.
home. Yeah. But recommend the speakers, get the extra, It's so interesting that you say it that way too, though, because it's also that, like, I remember having gone through mixes on different films and stuff like that. It's like when you go and sit in the sound stage, of course, like you're hearing it probably at its like the best it's ever going to be,
It's never going to
because
be better.
it's never going to get better than that. And even the theaters that it's going to play in, not all of them are going to have the
Yeah.
capability that sound stage is going to have while you're sitting there. And so you sort of have, there's this moment of like, this is the best it's ever going to be, but also it's like, oh yeah, I guess like the experience will never be the same for anybody else who watches the film and experiences, because not every independent theater is going to have the full 7.1. I mean, a lot of them do, I guess, but not all of them will. And even if
No,
they do,
and
they're not always balanced and calibrated properly. Like I've watched movies in many theaters where the sound isn't calibrated properly to movie theater, and the reverberation in the theater isn't balanced properly, like it's not buffered properly, and so on. Like the Rio Theater is a great example where it's like it's a fun place to watch a movie, but don't go there if you want to hear like the sound design really really pop
no, yeah,
always.
I mean that's when you go to a Cineplex, AVX, or of course IMAX, but that's just different technology. You have to take that into consideration when you're watching it. But it is just really cool that something can look and sound so good. And the thing about the picture side of it, like at our post facility at Elemental, I remember walking into the back and seeing the projector that they have. I mean, the projector is like half the size of my car, and Dave was telling me like this projector is the same projector that the best Cineplex screen in Canada has as its projector. So I'm like, okay, so unless I'm at that theater or, a theater just like that, I'm never going to
Mhm.
see the movie look so good. And then ultimately, when we do our final playback at the post facility in early August, mid August is kind of our deadline right now for finishing Remnant. I mean, that's going to be the best experience I'll ever have of watching this movie. I think it will only get worse from there potentially. So unless I just
Yeah.
go see it at a Cineplex AVX, which would be part of my distribution plan, knock on wood, we can get a nice theatrical run, at least in Canada.
Yeah.
I'm hoping. I mean, we do have a Canadian
Yeah.
distributor. It just comes down to, do they believe the film is going to play well in a theater? And I'm going to argue that it will.
Well, and that's going to come down to the weeds of distribution. I mean, there's also a bit of a way to game the system a bit too, where that you just got to make sure that in the right theaters you fill it up properly and make it create enough of a buzz that it's going to get more and more release dates and so on. But the other thing too that you mentioned was like doing the Dolby Atmos and waiting for the distributor to kind of come in. If they want it, they're going to ask for it. I
Mhm.
think that that's also something that we especially as independent filmmakers, like you want to throw the best project out, the best finished version of the film, and that would include the Dolby Atmos because that's now the thing to do. But you realize in the end, like, getting a really good, solid 7.1 mix and everything like that complete and ready for theaters is going to be pretty darn good and going to be pretty elevated above what and the Atmos is going to be that extra bonus. But that's something that, if you do have the distributor come along and say we want this, then you leave it to them to do it. It's like upresing. What was Robert Rodriguez's first movie? The
El
El
Mariachi.
Mariachi. Like
Yeah.
he shot it on 16 mil, but I mean it
Yeah.
was thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars when it got picked up for them to upres it to a movie that they actually wanted to show in a theater. And that's what
Yeah.
you leave for. You hope you want the movie to be good enough that it warrants something like that to happen to it.
And also, not all movies need Dolby Atmos. I mean, what Dolby Atmos ultimately is, most movies are mixed in like 5.1, right, and 7.1, depending on what your deal is. Dolby Atmos essentially has speakers in the ceiling, and so you can
Mhm.
add more sounds. So, like if you watched Obsession, There's a scene where I believe he's in bed and she's kind of like running around the house, and there's just very specifically a shot of Bear, and behind the camera you hear footsteps, and the footsteps kind of go over your head. That's a Dolby Atmos effect for sure. It's just feeling like you
Mhm.
are really surrounded by this. Um, and I know that specifically because Matt, who is the co-owner of Elemental, our post facility, was the sound mixer who did that scene, and or who mixed the movie in Atmos. So yeah, there's benefits. It's cool. It's fun, but it's not necessary. And yeah, I mean, it's expensive because Dolby has requirements. They have specifications that you have to adhere to, and they have like license fees and all of that stuff that goes along with it. So yeah, as an indie filmmaker, you can't really pay for it. But if somebody
But it
else
is,
wants to foot the bill, great.
yeah, I don't disagree with you though on the idea that the atmospheric feeling, like if going to a movie theater, people always talk about, oh, you go to the movie theater to see the movie on the big screen, but it's like you actually, I think, go to a movie theater to hear the movie,
Yeah.
because
Oh, big
I
time.
think that like the hearing the film in the movie theater is actually far, I think, more significant difference in experience
Yeah.
than even the visuals. Like the visuals are obviously, that's what we're going to see. Motion, it's a motion picture, but it's the way that sound sounds in a really good movie theater, it cannot be replicated in any other environment. And so that's the one thing where you definitely get that, like the idea of those footsteps. I love that stuff. And I remember, you know even geeking out on this when I was, before I even got into the film industry, it's just geeking out on the idea of like when you had really good speakers for a home theater system, and you could hear even just
Yeah.
stuff behind you, or like stuff on the walls beside you, not just what was in front of you. And I remember mixing, even like I mixed my first short myself, right? And to my own chagrin, but it was fun because just like being able to put those, and finding ways to put the sounds in different parts of the system, and having like a little home theater system that I could like pretend that I was actually going to be watching this on at some point in my life. And I
Yeah.
thought, this is the coolest thing. This is the coolest thing in the world. Adding sound effects to a film, or adding atmosphere in a film, or adding all these elements to a film, I think is one of the coolest sort of like low pressure jobs that you can possibly do, to because everything you do just makes it somehow better. Sometimes it can be overdone, but it's
Well, it
somehow
can be
every
overdone, and it brings it to life. It really,
yeah,
really, truly brings it to life. And again, like, especially with a horror movie, a sound is 80%. It's 80/20. And most movies, honestly, it's all about the sound. You can watch a movie that has a shitty camera that was shot with poor quality camera. You can watch high 8 90s camcorder, but if the sound is bad, you can't watch it. It really comes down to sound. The other
my
interesting thing
friend.
that happened over the course of the week was, once all of these scenes came together and truly like came to life, it was just this magical moment. I realized that some of the pacing in the movie was off because I'm not going to get into the specifics of the climax, but it's very intense. It's very big, much bigger than we ever had it in our Avid edit, with our temp sound and temp score. And in the theater, it hits you, and then it's all over, and there isn't enough sort of room to breathe after that, for the like the epilogue, and for these final moments. And it just all felt so fast and so rushed. And we watched it, and I was like, well, look, like, I don't want to change anything about the finale, but yeah, I think we have to open up the movie again. And so one thing that I had to do this week also was like re-edit certain sequences of the movie, even though we've locked picture, right? Like, it's what they say, like, you're never allowed to do. You Once you lock picture, the movie is done. You cannot open it back up again. It turns out it's actually really easy. And I know this because I'm the one doing it right now. So like,
Yeah,
I'm kind of acting as like, I'm an editor of the movie, but I'm also like the assistant editor handling all of these other technical duties right now. And so I was like, what do I have to do to make this happen? And they're like, oh, you just need this, this, and this. It's like, oh, okay. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. So I went back in, I recut part of the movie. Just again, we're talking like a couple, maybe 30, adding 30 seconds here and there. But just because on the huge theater screen with all of that sound, it plays differently than when you're watching it on a small monitor right next to you in your home office.
Yep.
And that's something you really do have to anticipate, and it's hard to anticipate that without knowing how something is going to play on the big screen. So
Yep.
yeah, so I had to go back and open up the movie and add some time, and it's all fine. So
Well, I think that like I talked to a cinematographer about that too. It's like, cinematography for the big screen is much different than cinematography for the small screen. And it's like, when you're making a film, a lot of times we're watching it through the lens of, we're watching it through our director's monitors and 27-inch monitor that you might have available for you at Village, and
yeah.
that's the biggest screen you're seeing it on. But so like things that appear small, you might think, oh, it's too small, it needs to be bigger in screen, like I need to see the faces more. And then you realize when you watch it on a big screen, if you're going to watch it on a big screen theater, you know wide shots and medium wide shots are just fine sometimes for seeing faces. Like you're going to see all the expressions you need to see, and you're going to see all the action. And a close up doesn't have to be like doesn't have to go to like
Hmm.
neck to top of head. It can actually be have a little bit of room to breathe and still be a pretty close up shot. You're still seeing a face.
Well, no, totally. And I shot Remnant knowing that like this is a theater movie. So I very rarely, only for important moments, would really go into a very tight close up. Most of the time, the closest that we would get would be like an MCU, and we played a lot of stuff in mediums and MCU for the more intimate stuff, and then close up for the really intimate things. But like if I was hired tomorrow to direct a Netflix movie, I would be shooting it differently than how I shot Remnant. It's
Yep.
just I know that this movie is going to play on TV, so it has to look differently. So
It's
yeah,
a director told me, a director who directs a lot of those sort of, you know, TV movies and MOW said, see faces, see places. That's what a movie is, or a television movie is.
yeah,
Show the face, show the place, show the face. Those are the two angles you need.
yeah, and I mean TV also, right? Like even I have a friend that directs quite like big TV from like Bridgerton, like that kind of level of director. And they spend all of this money to go to these like castles and incredible locations. But if you watch the show, so much of that show just lives in close-ups.
Yeah.
And even when they're shooting it, it's like the general rule when you're starting out is like, okay, first you get the wide shot, and then you go in and you get the medium shot, and then you go in and get the close-up. In TV, work the other direction. Start with the close up because that's where the scene is going to most likely live. Producers will just end up cutting into the close up and living there. Shoot that out, get your medium, and then when you're running out of time, pull back and get the wide because you're only going to be in that wide for 15 seconds at the top of the scene, and then you're going to get into the close ups. And I'm not saying
Yep.
that's all TV, but generally speaking, like next time you watch Bridgerton or something like that, or really, honestly, any TV show, just take a look and like time how long they're actually in the wide shot versus how much they're in coverage.
Yeah.
It's not like a movie for sure.
No, and you fall into a really big trap when you start, as a director, start, focusing on that wide master and getting like 10 takes of it because it's not running properly or something like that, and you wind up, blowing all your time on just trying to get the wide shot right when you realize that in most cases on the television, you're not going to live there long enough. For all that time you spent on it, you're not going to live there long enough, and you're going to be scrambling because you only got one or two takes of your close-ups, and now you have to kind of work with the material you have. I had a
Yeah.
question for you on the sound design, which this is always the thing is like how much of the ADR have you found you needed? Like, do you feel like you needed more ADR in this than you expected you would?
It's a good question. We used all of the ADR for Kim Coates that we recorded because a lot of his ADR was actually like we rewrote lines to help clarify certain story elements and had placeholders for that. So we needed to use that. We had to use all of the ADR for the finale because it was too chaotic on the day. I think I went through that last week or whatever. And
Right.
so we ended up using all of that, and it sounds really good. I'm really blown away by how well the actors did, but also the ADR engineers and all the technicians at Maverick. It sounds really, really good. And then we were very lucky with Nat Bolt, who came into ADR, and poor Nat had, well, she was like kind of losing her voice too at the
Mm.
time. And she's like, "Do I have to scream today?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're going to have to scream a little." And I felt awful. So made her scream. But luckily, she didn't lose her voice beyond that. However, when we got into the actual mix, Gregor was basically like, "Oh, do we have to use ADR here? Like, is there a reason why we recorded this?" And because sometimes it's a continuity thing, sometimes it's a noise, like a noise issue. Maybe there's a background noise or an actor stepped on the line, something like that. But for a couple specific moments in the scene, we were able to go back to the production track and use the production track instead of the ADR. And that was awesome because that specific beat that I'm talking about, the production track was just so much better than the ADR recording. And again, if you can just go with production 100% of the time, you're probably going to be better off unless you have to change the performance. We were very lucky with Talisa's performance in ADR in the finale because she came in, nailed it. So yeah.
ADR is not, it's not your enemy. It is definitely something that it sounds like you've used it, for what it's intended for. Like you are fixing some problems, but you're also like, you are making the film um, stronger in the end
Oh yeah,
than what you
and
had
some things
before.
just like on a technical level, you need to ADR because there's some, say like a character's voice has to become more demonic or something like that, and it just gives you more latitude in the post production process to apply an effect and actually manipulate the voice a little bit more than say the production track, and that's just from because the audio quality itself. So yeah, overall though, it was a very very smooth process.
The one thing that I think is, it's like the unnoticed thing that you do, which is with Foley and stuff like that, with footsteps and cloth and props and all these other things. And I am always fascinated. I always think to myself, oh, you're not, what do you care about it getting, the footsteps right and stuff like that? But how important is it to have footsteps and cloth and props and all those things sort of like just be at the right sound? Like sometimes the footstep is the footstep, but almost never on set is the footstep the one you want to use in the final mix, which means you're basically like replicating that for yourself. And obviously like hits and things like that, like things where people fall or a punch or something like that. Like those are things that obviously need extra Foley or extra, like you have to add that in post. But I've always found that what really gives life to scenes is like the sound of cloth moving, for example, on clothing, even though you don't want it to be overtake anything else because it's not meant to. It's just meant to fill it out, I guess, if you want to call it that, like fill out the scene more.
Yeah, it's really important, and it's some of the effects you don't really think about too much, and it's like, well, what does cloth sound like? Like what is that sound? But then when it's not there, you're missing it, and when it's there or the wrong sound, like the wrong quality of sound, you're like something's off. This doesn't feel right. So yeah, shout out to the Foley artists who look at the frame and figure out the exact sound that should be there. There's another really interesting element to it, and this was really important to me when I was directing Remnant or like in pre-production, and I'd keep telling everybody like there needs to be a haptic quality to this film because so many Hollywood films these days are just so glossy and smooth and lifeless in a way, and
Mhm.
I miss that feeling of like grit in the frame, and I just want there to be as much texture as possible, so like no smooth surfaces, like make sure the tablecloth has that like doily ripple in it, and the wallpaper just can't feel too smooth, and the couch the type of fabric needs to feel like this, and I think we really achieve that. And so when you watch these types of movies, I'm just talking about like any movie made like before 2015, like to some extent, but certainly like 70s, 90s films, they have this grittiness to them. And even look at Jurassic Park versus Jurassic Park Rebirth. Jurassic Park, they shot in a jungle.
Yep.
Rebirth, part of it, I'm sure there were plants around, but you could just tell it's not, doesn't have that real quality to it. And even the matte paintings themselves just look a little too glossy. Or like Frankenstein was one that I just watched recently where I was like, oh, this just doesn't. And again, like it's amazing production design, and it's not really a comment on the film, but there's just such a smooth texture to everything that it doesn't feel like that you want to go out and touch it. And so with Remnant, I really wanted to have that quality to it. And I think we achieved that. But part of that too is It needs to sound like it's something that you can touch or feel. And so there's also scientifically, they were saying, when you see a character touch something and it has that texture in it, our brain responds to that. We can actually feel what that texture is like by watching somebody do it. And so if you can see
Mhm.
it and hear it, you just are drawn into the movie a little bit
Yeah.
more, and you can actually be in that moment a little bit more. So that was really important to me.
And you fill out the senses, the other senses. You fill out like even taste and smell
Yeah.
from having those two be so well heightened and so well enhanced. And you're absolutely right. Like I think, well, that's just like with movies in general. It's like this idea that if when it's too polished, it's doesn't you can't get into it. Like it doesn't necessarily matter that whether it's science fiction or reality based. It's that sense that this is a story I'm in, and you have to immerse people in a story. And if they feel like there's too much design behind it, it will lose that feeling that you're in a story, like that you're actually part of the story. You're immersed in the story.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm glad that you guys have focused on that because it's that thing that nobody will talk about, but everybody will feel, will
Yeah.
experience.
And where I sort of, you know, jumped onto that train was there's a YouTube video, a YouTuber named of Stories of Old, I think is the channel. And I don't, I honestly, I forget the guy's name, but it's an amazing channel. He does these amazing video essays. And there's one specifically about the haptic side of filmmaking and how we've lost that in modern filmmaking. And I took a lot of what I just said from that video, but I applied it to Remnant, and it's so important to me moving forward. Like one other thing that I feel like we've lost is just sweaty characters. You know, like
Hmm.
people look pretty and there's sweat, but I'm talking about like Roy Scheider in Sorcerer sweat.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just you can feel the heat of the scene that they're in. I miss that. I want that kind of grittiness to filmmaking now.
Yeah. I agree.
Anyway, we should
100%.
probably jump into our main topic today,
Oh, yes.
which is something that everybody has to deal with in this day and age of filmmaking and TV production and you name it, and that is pitch decks. Pitch
Yeah.
decks, the bane of my existence, but a necessary evil. So, Anthony, what is a pitch deck? Why do we need them? What are they for?
So, what is a pitch deck? Well, effectively, I mean, it is a visual condensed version of the story you're trying to make. And that could be for television, that could be for a movie or whatever, but I guess for the purpose of this discussion, I'll say for a movie. And a pitch deck is basically a visual representation of the movie you plan to make or you're trying to make. It's also a sales piece. It's a sales piece.
Yeah,
It's not you trying to be impressive. It's a sales piece to someone else. You're trying to persuade someone else that they should do what you are asking them to do in your film. And you're right, like it is a definitely an art form, literally in and of itself. The pitch decks that I'm making right now, the pitch deck I've made for Quiet Canadians, we don't have cast attached.
yeah,
So there's no, you're trying to run and you don't have any footage filmed. So you're trying to run this thing, this or design this pitch deck without any actual reference points of what you have. Everything is conceptual at this stage. But you're also, it's hard to do a pitch deck. It's hard to do a pitch deck without having faces in it because people do want to because very few movies don't have faces in them. So you have to have something in there to represent what the film is going to look like. But then you also have to have something in there that's going to represent what the characters are going to look like. And that's always that fine line between is your pitch deck selling the film or is it selling the concept of the film?
yeah. There's a lot to get into there for sure. And just to back up, you're right. It's a sales document, and there are different. I guess we say pitch decks, but let's just say, like, for the sake of this, decks based on what your requirement is or who you're going to. And
Right.
so, as a TV writer, I'll make a pitch deck for a TV series that is designed to be read by producers and executives. So that's going to look a certain way and tell a certain story. For Remnant in the early stages, I made a pitch deck for investors, an investor deck. And so that had information that, and we'll dive into this specifically, but that had information that was very, very specific to what an investor would want to see and what they would want to know in order to become a part of my movie. And then later, as we continued to develop and we started to go after crew, cast, I basically created what became the main pitch deck, and that it also included my like director's vision, and then that basically would accompany the script wherever the script went. And so there were different versions of these documents. I think for the sake of this discussion, we should maybe talk about what goes into an investor deck, because that's probably the most tactile and useful information at this point. But also we can talk about the difference between that and then maybe the proper like pitch deck or director's deck that would
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah. So, what ultimately is a pitch deck geared towards an investor for? What absolutely has to happen in there? And I think that there's a good Darren Smith, who I know we've talked to before, and he says this right. He's like, the real thing you should be asking yourself when you're making your investor pitch deck is, what is the question the investor has? What is the
Mhm.
question that the financier has? Because the pitch deck is this, like people don't want to hear about your cinematography necessarily. Like that's not what it
Yeah.
is. But for a private investor and a financier, what is the question they're really asking? My answer to that is the investor is asking, how do I get my money back, and what protects my downside?
Yeah.
That's the basic thing that they want to know. And everything else is glossy and fun and everything like that. But that ultimately, in the end, that is what your private investor or prospective private investor has to leave with is they want to know how their money is coming back to them and what protects their downside.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the creative, as much as you think that your script is brilliant and this is the best movie to ever be produced, they don't really care about the creative.
Mhm.
Yes, they want to make sure that you know how to tell a story and that you know what your movie is. But if you're opening with pages of a creative summary, you know you're making the wrong deck. That's for the other one. And frankly, we'll get into how much text should even be in these things. And the answer there, actually, by the way, is like very, very little. Investors don't want to read very much. Nobody wants to read very much, frankly. In fact, I hate reading pitch decks myself. Like when I get them submitted to me, I'm like, oh God, I hate it. They're not fun documents to read. I want pictures. I want things. I want little blips of information with cool pictures that tell me what this movie is going to feel like, what your concept is. That's I mean my response to how it should be.
Yeah. And from this standpoint, obviously, like it could be very drainy to throw in, information on financials and things like that. So you have to present it in a visually interesting way.
Yeah, so like graphs and charts are great
Yeah.
for financial information. But let's just talk about exactly what that financial information is. So like I have my remnant deck in front of me. I can't show it. I can't share the screen. Unfortunately, it's like still confidential. But here's what I have. Tell me if it's wrong, or if you agree, or maybe there's a way to tweak it. So I have. I think there's actually. I'll just preface this by saying there's too much text already. I'm looking back at this and I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? But
That's
I
because
guess
you're a writer.
somehow it worked. Yeah, yeah. And so I have an executive summary to start, which is basically the
Yeah.
log line and our funding goal. And I have a target audience point here. These are all like bullet points, and distribution paths. So like from film festivals, theatrical release, streaming, and international markets. Um, I have a page for market validation. So we're making a horror movie. So what I did was I threw in comps of other horror movies to say this movie, like what do I have here? Um, Actually, I don't have Insidious there, which I think I should have. But Insidious was in the same ballpark budget wise, but it made this much money. And
Right.
that's a double-edged sword, because if you start saying, well, this movie's going to make $400 million, um, there's a certain expectation that you just set. Because also Insidious, although it was indie, it wasn't really indie. It was still part of the studio system. So
Yeah.
you have to be careful there. Market validation. Then I have a very short summary of the movie, because chances are the investor's not going to read the script. Maybe they'll want to, but they might just want a very, very quick summary, which is like a one pager, essentially. I have that. I actually also I made a 90-second tone reel that I cut together using all sorts of other horror movies. In this case, Oculus, Smile, The Conjuring, and Insidious. And I cut that together with some music, and then I put a link to that reel in my PDF. I have that. I have a tone section. I have a section on revenue streams, so how this movie could make money from theatrical to streaming. And then I go into the bios. So my bio, the writer bio, producer. From there, talk about audience and distribution. And then I talk about the hook for why this worked. And again, I'm not saying that this is the right way. Looking back at this, I think I would change a lot of things. And then we get into the waterfall and exactly like near the end, the investor terms, like what does your money get you? So if you invest
Right.
X amount, this is the credit that you get. This is how involved you're going to be in this film. If you invest over 50K, this is how the waterfall affects you. And then some contact information. And that was the initial investor deck. That's what got it all started. I think it evolved over time, but yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you've got some really good things. There's a really key point that you made right at the beginning, which is the confidentiality of all of this, because you cannot just be emailing this thing out to every person you have in your email Rolodex, or like every person you have on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is, because there is also a very big danger in that you're not allowed to solicit investors publicly in without having proper public disclosure statements and things like that. And I mean, I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but anyway, the idea there that confidentiality is a very important thing to step into right away. I think some of the things that you've brought up are good, good ways to enter people into the idea of like what's the discussion, what's the financial discussion that you're getting into. um, Something you said that really hit me, I wanted to hit, and then I lost it because I was listening to what you were saying. But the other part of this is that I like what you've said with regards to like tone reel, but making it like 90 seconds, and like the creative elements being like very short but very to the point, enough so that someone goes, oh, this is a movie I'd want to see, which is basically all you're trying to do is get something that someone might say, oh, I would want to see this. But ultimately in the end, you're looking for people to take a look at your film and go, okay, how do I get my money back? This is what it was. Marketing. One of the things, I've done a couple of pitches lately for Quiet Canadians, and one of the things that has come up consistently is, how are you going to market this thing? What's your marketing
Also, that's
plan
a
going to be?
really good point, and that's something that became a big point of contention last year with certain investors for us. But I'm curious, yeah, where are you at with marketing?
Well, I think that you need to have some kind of plan that recognizes the current landscape, because how
Mhm.
the distributor plans to market your film, if you get a distributor, like if Bloomhouse came on and bought your film, like Obsession and stuff like that, they of course would have their whole marketing team behind your film.
Well, this
But
is the issue. This
yeah,
this is sorry, but like this is what we ran into because that is not like very specifically our investors who are not attached to this film were asking how we were going to market this, and they're like, "What about Get Out? Like Get Out is a small film," and I was like, Get Out was a $5 million studio movie. It feels like an indie, sure, but the marketing budget for Get Out was probably $20 million. Like, and it
yeah.
wasn't part of the production budget. And so we're like, that's not part of this production budget. And do I think that marketing should be part of the production budget as an indie filmmaker? 100%. But then what is the expectation? Because in Hollywood, the expectation is marketing is usually the same cost as the film itself. You know, if you spend $100
Mhm.
million on a movie, you're probably spending $100 million to market it, somewhere in that ballpark, tens of millions at least, right? And so, how does an indie film pull something like that off? I don't think you can. I had a meeting with Telefilm last year when we were pitching Remnant in the production program, and we even put $100,000 for marketing in our budget. And they said, "Why would you do that? That's the distributor's job. Don't put that in your budget." And I was like, "That's such a backwards way of thinking." Telefilm, classic. And again, because we had to cut costs and whatever, we ended up pulling that out later on in the process. Now, right now I'm in a position where we have a little bit of money for marketing, but it's not very much. Certainly not double the movie or 50% of the movie, but it's in that, it's something that we can play with a little bit. But yes, so much of these costs come down to the distributor. And here's the other crazy part about at least making a film in Canada is that the distributor doesn't even have that money. They're relying on Telefilm, the marketing fund from Telefilm, for that money.
Right.
Some distributors can afford it, but it's not very much. Many of them are dipping into the Telefilm pool to get that money. And if your film wasn't produced by Telefilm, they don't have access to the marketing funds. Well, technically they do, but priority goes to films that were actually produced
Films that
by Telefilm. And so that might actually ruin your chances of even getting a distributor in Canada because you weren't produced by Telefilm. And even if they want your movie, they can't market it.
right.
So what a
So
crazy
that's what,
system
so
this
my
is.
question. So where do you come out on this then? Because you've gone down the road with another investor who asked you these questions, like how do you plan to market the film? But you've come back to, or have you come back to, we're going to leave that to the distributor to figure it out.
Right now, we're leaving it to the distributor.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to the point where those discussions have happened yet because we only have a couple distribution deals in place, but we don't have like the big one. We don't have the United States yet, or
Right.
or like or most of the world, frankly. So that
Yeah.
hasn't, and like the film's not even done, so they don't even know what to do with the film yet. Um,
Right.
with that said, like, yeah, I would love to just go out and raise a little bit more money for marketing and handle this myself, but yeah, where are you at?
Well, yeah, I think maybe it's more along the lines of you have to have an idea of how this film can be marketed. So perhaps it's more about you're not necessarily putting it in your finance plan as like a budget line item, but you're putting it in your finance plan as a this is how this almost like this is how the film can be marketed, and thus this is what's going to happen, or we're going to aim to do after once the movie's completed and so on, and we're in the sales process of so on. So you're almost like creating the roadmap for the distributor to grab onto if they decide to jump on your film. But this isn't a pitch for the distributor.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
and
it's a
so
good because in the States, someone has to pick up that marketing budget, and Obsession got Blumhouse on board, right? So Blumhouse came on board and said, and once you have Blumhouse, it's like that's your stamp of approval.
yeah, this is also a very interesting time because how do I say this? There's a great episode of The Town with Matthew Bellamy, um, from like last week or the week before, and he has this guy on who a journalist who wrote this article about clipping. Have you heard of clipping before?
Mm-mm.
It's basically, as it turns out, everything that we see online that we believe ha- has gone viral has not actually gone viral. It's almost impossible now for anything to actually organically go viral. Justin Bieber at Coachella had to use a clipping service just to cut through the noise and go viral on Instagram and TikTok and these platforms. And what clipping is basically is an advertising agency, I believe, hires out these other companies. So there's kind of like two steps to the studio that's behind the property. And these other companies go in and create memes for your movie. And they will just look at your movie and they're just going to create tons and tons of posts and memes. And right now it's all done by humans, but eventually I'm sure this will be done by AI. And they start just posting these, you know, with these like kind of burner accounts on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, and we're talking like 70,000 accounts, and they start creating the volume and the momentum around the property in some way. So did Obsession actually go viral? We don't know. Did Indie Never Ready actually go viral? Probably not. All of this was done through the studios hiring these companies to then create these viral moments. One that came up and nobody could really point to is it actually viral or not is at the end of Disclosure Day. I forget her name, but the actress that played the news anchor that delivers all of the news. all of a sudden after the movie, like brilliant performance, truly did a great job. She deserves all the accolades, but she just kept popping up in everybody's feed over and over and over again. And it was like, wait a second, did her publicist hire a clipping company to just start pushing her and pushing her into the algorithm? And that's what's happening right now. So it's also not that expensive, to be honest. I want to say it's $1 per thousand views. Where if you go
Mhm.
on Instagram, I think it's $10 per thousand views to promote whatever content you post. So it's much cheaper than just buying advertising space essentially on a social media platform. But that's literally my next strategy is like, okay, can we just look into these clipping companies? Because that's the only way to cut through the noise and actually create a sense that your movie's actually out in the world. Otherwise, it's just going to get buried by everybody else doing the same thing.
Right. So then maybe like from an investor standpoint, like it's more of a, I mean, this is also the side of things. So it's like once this movie comes out, which, your movie will be coming out publicly a year from now, right? Like ish,
Yeah.
there will be whatever, whatever festival circuit thing happens. Obviously that's a place, but in terms of actually appearing in a theater where marketing needs to be spent or done to get people into butts into seats,
Yeah.
that'll be a year from now. Well, that's 2 years after your pitch deck was made. So
Yeah.
all of this stuff that we're talking about is new stuff that might not even have existed or might have been in its infancy when you were first pitching this project. And most of us are in the same boat where we're pitching a project that is 2 to 3 years away from someone actually seeing it. So who knows? TikTok could go bankrupt. Who knows what could happen in the time frame? So even listing those kind of things is not necessarily appropriate. So I think maybe it's more distilling back to what you were talking about with what your pitch deck is supposed to do. And in the pitch deck for the investor is not necessarily how you plan to get this to market, because that part is actually, I mean, there's a movie theater and there's a streaming service. At some point it's going to get into both of those two things. That's basically, it'll happen at some point. That's not even a question, right? The phase that you're trying to do with your investors, you're trying to sit there and go, what is the project that you have? How is it going to, like, how is it going to work? How does my money get back to me? And what's the downside? Is this the right time? Like, what makes this movie relevant now? Because that's really the urgency part of things, which is,
Mhm.
you want to jump on this now because of X. It's either something happening in the world right now, or this is a really good time for horror films, which is another great pitch these days. If you're pitching a horror film, I mean, there's no better time. Horror films are hot, so you want to make sure that
Yeah.
that's codified in the document to say, like, this is the time to jump on this kind of stuff because it's a good thing. And then the other one is basically validating that you're the person who can do it. Like you
Yeah.
can, and your team are the people that can actually make this thing happen. That you have the, not just the credentials, but you also just have the right team around you to execute this project. So it's not a question of like, I have a dream and I've never, been on a movie set before.
Yeah, yeah, you have to have all of those things in place. I think you're right. Like it's hard to be very specific about how you're going to market the movie, or like I was just talking about clipping. And again, I don't really know too much about it. This is just what I heard from one podcast episode, and I want to look more into it. But it's kind of this hidden secretive element of the advertising space right now when it comes to movies and TV because of social media. But I completely understand where an investor's coming from of like, okay, I'm going to give you money. How am I making my money back? Like everybody knows that you can create something, but if you don't go out and sell it, nobody will ever know about it. Nobody will ever buy it.
Mhm.
So how do you market the movie? That's the $1 million question, literally. I
Yeah.
think for whatever I do next, yeah, I'll fight hard to preserve a little bit more in the post production side of things to market directly.
Well, and marketing is inviting the right people to participate in the making of the film. So, for example, your cast is marketing. I mean, the best marketing is a cast that people recognize. I mean,
Yeah,
of plain and simple. Markiplier with Iron Lung, the marketing is he has a YouTube channel with 30, 40 million subscribers. That's the marketing plan. There,
yeah.
he doesn't have to sit there and say how he's going to target them or anything like that. He's like, no, I have 40 million followers. There you go. That's
In
marketing.
influencer screenings, that's a thing for sure, right? Try to get, like, in my case, it's a horror movie, so horror influencers, send them the movie, get them to talk about it, right? Get the word out
Yep.
closer to when it's coming out. There are definitely ways to make this happen. That should definitely be a section in your pitch deck. But going back to the deck itself, like, what else is in your investor deck that you're working with right now?
Yeah, a graph description of how a film waterfall actually works. Where do they fit in this? What your terms are, but in a very loose way of basically like not guaranteeing, like, you could throw hypotheticals in there, I think, but I think that really the key is to say, like, where does the investor fit in the waterfall of money as money comes in? When does the investor start seeing money back, and what's the rough timeline for that? So that can be represented in a graph form or just a basic gist of, like, here's the timeline that we're aiming for the film. This is when you can start to see first revenues coming back. Who eats away at that coming down, because that's the realistic side of things. But more importantly, it's demonstrating that you have thought about this. You understand that a dollar spent on the movie isn't a dollar that's necessarily coming down the line to the investor, but you're giving them a realistic portrayal of how this thing can operate, where their investment will fit into this, because your pitch deck, again, it's not a contract, and it's not an offering. And one of the things that you need to be clear about is that this is not an offering of to sell. Like there's a lot of due diligence, and we
Yeah.
have to make sure that you're accredited. We have to make sure that you can afford, that you understand the risks associated with investing in anything, but also just investing in products that have higher risk. But the idea there is that you mitigate that by showing, like you're saying, comp examples of films in similar genres and similar veins that have done well, just to demonstrate that there is potential for success and financial success in this in
Yeah, that
projects
there's a
like
market
these.
validation for a project like this. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're not making some
and
weird
and
abstract film that no one has ever seen before, to the extent where, like, that means nobody's ever going to want to watch this in some way, and it's going to be impossible to sell. Yeah.
yeah, and also, like, for you, like for a horror film, there's some selling features to lower budget horror films. Like, you have to explain what when they start seeing budget, reports in Variety and Hollywood Reporter. I'm talking about investors who don't invest in film a lot. They might just have a
Yeah.
loose association, and they have, they read newspaper articles, but they're not like in the business themselves. So they're going to read things like, oh, that movie was budgeted at $40 million. That movie was budgeted at $50 million. And you're coming into me with this $1 million, $2 million project, or whatever, your $3 million project. How on earth does that movie be the same movie that I'm seeing newspaper reports about? Like, clearly won't be the same film, and you have to demonstrate why that can be the same film. So some of these lower budget, horror films are great examples of comps that are like, this was lower budget, but it did well and it looked good.
Yeah.
Like,
And
it
I,
looked
I
good
bet
doing
you
it.
there are a lot of filmmakers making low budget horror movies right now that are like, we're the next obsession. And it's like, no, 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 that
Yep.
don't say that. Like, that's an anomaly. And if you could make a fraction of the money that obsession made, you're still going to be in the black, and that's great. But please don't say that you're going to gross $400 million. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And real purpose of your pitch deck is to inspire the conversation. Like, if the person you're showing this pitch deck to starts, saying, who would be great in this film? This actor, this actor, this actor. That's engagement. You're trying to get engagement out of it. You're trying to like juice up their Hollywood producer mind of, like, what they think could be possible in this film. And so that's a good thing. You want that kind of, like, and you want them to start thinking, oh, maybe this could be the next Obsession, or this could be the next Backrooms, or Iron Lung, or whatever. But then in your wheelhouse, obviously, like, you're sitting there going, yeah, but those are, like, obviously those are moonshots that happen to work out. I don't think that anybody who got involved in that film thought that Obsession was going to be a $400 million box office movie.
no,
Like,
no, for
nobody
sure.
who got involved
Yeah,
in that thought that, but they thought that it had potential, and the story had potential. There were no name actors in that film, so there's no sellingness to it,
Mhm.
other than India's she's a video game streamer. I mean, that's basically her claim to fame before
Yeah,
this,
that
right?
and I think she was actually in Superman and Lois, like, as a supporting role, so, like, some TV
Right.
work, but, like, certainly not a household name like she is now. And of course, you're going to point to the success stories in your genre. You're not going to, have comps that are all box office bombs and say we can do better than
Right.
that. That's not a very good way to sell anything, right? So, okay, in terms of order of, because I'm through it now, but you're in the middle of getting
Yeah.
investors. And so, like, in terms of the pitch deck order, how would you structure your investor deck?
Well, I think, well, so obviously, first you have a key art title page, and that should look like a movie poster vibe to it. Because again, you're trying to show people almost like 3 years from now, this is like an example of what you could see. And so a little bit of a key art that feels like a movie poster. The second thing I think you do need to have, like, what is this movie? What story is it? So a log line and a short, synopsis of like, what's the film, with an image that kind of either from a movie or a graphic design or whatever it is that sort of
I'll throw
tells you the
this out
picture.
right now. I totally agree. You need tons of images and concept art. Well, not even original concept art, but just art that's going to speak to what your movie is. My personal taste is to use shot deck and
Hmm.
pull from movies that actually exist. And shot deck's amazing for searching for what you need and using that art. Personally, look, your mileage is going to vary, but AI art just really is off-putting to me.
Yep.
And so if people load up decks with like too much AI art, I and it's not even like the ethical reason or whatever. It just doesn't like look as it's not as engaging to me because everything kind of looks too glossy and cinematic. But if you have a picture of a thriller that is like a great movie or something, and it's like that, it just kind of says like, hey, this has been done before, and I'm going to do that. I'm doing something familiar in my own way. It just kind of speaks to like it feels more real because of it.
Yeah,
That's
and
my
this
own
is this
opinion.
is also, I think, where I agree with you, and I think that this is also where it is good to pressure test this with other people. It's also good to, if you have access to it, and I mean, this is why development money sometimes, there's a line item in development where people spend money on creating pitch decks. I mean, you can do it yourself for very cheap and almost for free, but there are people out there who professionally design pitch decks, and you can
Yeah.
kind of see the difference between the two, right? Like
Oh,
I've
you
I
really
have
can.
done both before, where it's like someone who knows what they're doing versus someone who versus doing it yourself. Like doing it yourself, you can definitely do it, and you're basically trying to have some design sense and slap it together and put it together that way. But a true pitch deck designer knows what they're doing, much like a true trailer designer. Like trailer editors are
Yeah.
very different than film editors. Like a trailer editor is not trying to make a movie. They're not trying to be a movie editor with the trailer. They're trying
Yeah.
to they are
Big
trying to
time.
get an audience to they're trying to capture an audience's attention. And so the same thing with the pitch deck. So I agree with you. Like I think the AI, also I think AI art, like it was a new thing about a year ago. So you were starting to see these things, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. It's amazing what you can do. But it's another thing that has become so oversaturated that it's now very familiar. You can see it everywhere anyway. So you're not wowing people with like suddenly some great designed art. And so you're better off just grabbing shot deck photos and finding a nice way to arrange them so that it is appealing, so it doesn't look like you're, again, just throwing a whole bunch of images at people, but that you
There's
actually have
also
some sense
there's
of what you're
also
doing.
something about like using AI art to get exactly what you want it to be in the movie. And like I get the reasoning behind that, but if you actually just use a frame grab from a movie that isn't exactly what you want, it allows the reader to use their imagination. And that's actually
Yep.
more powerful because you're not saying like this is exactly what it's going to look like. This is exactly even concept art. Like I learned the lesson the hard way. Like we had concept art made for a TV show pitch, and it was like, isn't that cool? Like this company made concept art for us. But then the executives are like, oh, so that's what it's going to be. And if the executive
Yeah.
doesn't like it, you're screwed. But if
Yeah.
you just have something that's kind of rough in place and let them imagine it, that also gives them the ability to come in and tweak it, like help you work on that and be a part of the process from a creative
And
standpoint.
isn't there a psychological advantage too with having some, like, again, images from films, because we talk about comps, having like actually mentioning the names of the films that you're comparing your film to. But if you have a couple of images that are from films that are like the film you're trying to make, that kind of represent some scenes that
Yeah.
you might be filming or things like that, even without mentioning the film itself, it almost feels like that's an image from your film that you plan to have. But psychologically, what you're doing is you're tying people to, like, oh, I really liked that movie, or I thought that movie was really good, and this is an image from that film. Oh, if you
Yeah.
can make something that kind of is like that, I will be so happy to see it. Again, you're just trying to awaken the imagination of the people that are involved. The danger, of course, is that sometimes what you don't want to do is you have like 5 images of the same actor, for example, because you wind up then tying people to the idea of, well, if so and so isn't in this film,
Oh
this
yeah, you
doesn't feel
must
like,
be casting so and so. Exactly.
yeah, like you're trying to cast this person in this film. And it's like, no, I'm not getting Ryan Gosling for the movie. He's out of our wheelhouse. So if you get too dangerous in terms of showing that kind of stuff and sort of like over deliver on or over saturate the pitch deck with the same actor's image, for
Mhm.
example, then you sort of tie, it's like, well, if we don't get someone like that person, it won't work.
It's more about the tone and the
Or the
style and the
tone.
the feeling of that
Yeah.
actor rather than the specific face.
Yeah,
So,
and it's
okay.
helpful in
Go
your
go
pitch
ahead.
deck for investors too. Like, just to kind of go further on that is, again, this is a bit of a procedural thing. It's like, how are you mitigating risk, basically? And tax credits are a big one, which is why a lot of pitch decks that I see always mention, we're going to film in BC, which has X amount of tax credits, or
Yep.
we're filming in this
Yep.
state in the US, which has this amount of tax credits. And so that's something that you're throwing in there for the investor to show that they're not investing the entire amount of the movie, or their entire, if they are investing the entire amount of the movie, it's not all at risk.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And so then what else do you have?
Either at the beginning or at the end or both. And I've done this in two pitch decks. What is having some kind of thing that basically says, this is not an offering. This is just we're just chatting. Like
Mhm.
it's kind of this is just for your information kind of bit, just to make sure again that people understand that the images that are being used, the figures that you're throwing in there are not
It's a starting point of the
promises. It's a
conversation.
starting point of a
Exactly. This
conversation.
isn't a
This
contract.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, if this thing got out into the world, it would be okay. Like, even if it is confidential, it would still be okay if someone happened to see it. I would also have, so you have the waterfall, you have that kind of stuff. You have a little bit of timeline, like what's your timeline on this film?
Mhm.
Because again, you're trying to get, there's a little bit of the sales pitches. You're trying to get some urgency into people's decision making. So
Yeah.
it's important for you to have this conversation with me now, because we're going to picture 6 months from now. If you're interested in this, now is the time to talk about it. Not someday we hope to make a movie. So even if your figures are gonna be changing, like they, even if you're not hitting your timelines, and you're pushing that always should have an updated thing. So it's like, if I did this today, I'd be saying, okay, we're going to picture it. We're going to picture. We want to be greenlit this time. We want to be going to picture it this time.
Yeah.
You do want to put in, how much are you raising?
Well, I was just gonna say how much you're raising, how much you currently already have.
How much you
What's
currently
what's
have?
your ask? Be very
Yeah.
specific about what you actually need and how that breaks out into the overall budget of your film versus how much you have. What are the tax credits? What's the breakdown of the tax credit? The rough calculation, and how much do you actually need left in terms of raising equity in the film?
Yeah, and a visual representation of the budget of the film, like even if it's just the top sheet of the film, but it's kind of like done in a, you know,
Yeah.
a nice way. You don't have to staple a copy of your, Excel sheet to it or anything like that. Although you
No,
could,
but again, like a pie
um,
chart or anything
pie
just
chart or
helps
something. Yeah,
break it down and make it simple. Yeah.
and a finance plan. Like, so the other side of it too is, where do they fit in on the finance plan? Like, so equity is X amount of dollars, tax credits are going to count for X amount of dollars. Money you already have is X amount of dollars. Producer deferral fees are X amount of dollars. And this all equals the budget of the film. So it's like, 1
Yeah.
million equals 1 million one way or another. So the money you plan to raise is the money you need to make the film. And so
Yeah.
you're trying to show that, you've got to show that there's no gap between those two. And even if, again, some of this is not committed, it's hypothetical. The nice thing with tax credits is you can sit there and literally say the tax credits are committed, because once, if assuming this movie gets finished and gets distributed, that money is coming back, even if the movie sucks.
Yeah.
It's still
Exactly.
going to come back. It's still coming back. So that money is committed. It's
There's a
just not
risk, but it's
papered.
quite low risk. I mean, the
Yeah,
only
it's
risk is not finishing the film. But if you know,
exactly. That's
and
that's
then
you have
I
bigger
would
problems.
say you need to do a breakdown of your team, and lay out your track record. Like, why are you the people to make this movie, and how are you going to pull this off? Well, it's because like I have 20 years in the industry, and I did this movie and this movie. The posters that you work on, the movies you've worked on that are successful, help. From director, writer, producing team. That's really for the investor deck. I think that's probably all you need. But if you have three to
Yeah.
four key people, unless you have like an amazing DP and production designer or someone, or
Yeah.
some of those crew positions could be on one page like all together. But yeah, the track record and bios, very short bios of each of your key personnel, that would be important.
Yeah, you can list off, our legal team is this, our account, whatever. It's like you can list those off. You don't need to have like bios on everybody. You just want to show that you actually have a team being built around you.
Yeah,
I think also like this is a malleable document, so like it should live on. You should always have access to it to change it and update it. Which
yeah,
because what you are pitching today, a month from now, you could have a cast member attached suddenly. And once you have that, you want to put that person in there because that's an important sales piece. That's actually probably the most important get that you can have for your film is your first cast member, or your especially if it's your lead or something like that, and especially if it's someone who's got some recognition out. I hate using the word saleability because we don't know what is saleability now. Even I was at the Leos the other night and I was talking. We were sitting. We went as guests of RBC because we're clients of theirs, and so we were sitting at the RBC table. So all I was doing was talking to the lawyers and the bankers,
oh, okay,
and
yeah,
all they were talking about. They said nobody knows who's bankable anymore.
yeah.
Nobody has a clue. So bankability is not even a thing anymore, but it's more like recognizability. So like you want if you are going to put a name of an actor in there, it should be someone that even if they don't recognize the face, they recognize their credits. So if you put in someone that you had who acted in Heated Rivalry last season, well, they'll recognize Heated Rivalry and they'll
Yeah.
go, "Oh, this person was in Heated Rivalry, or this person was in Game of Thrones once, or this person was in, the last
Mhm.
big blockbuster film." Even if they played a supporting role in that film,
I mean, I still think that
you
a familiar face is more important than anything. Like, if you can get a familiar
absolutely,
face, that's definitely going to help you because even if they don't know the person's name, if an investor goes like, "Oh, that guy. Oh yeah. Okay. You can get him? Okay, cool. That's pretty great." Yeah, but like when
exactly.
sales agents and distributors are like, "Well, if you can just get this person, we can sell them for $800,000 and then, you know, pre-sale." Um cool if that worked out, but those numbers really aren't as firm as they used to be. Before, I think there was sort of a list and you can get by with things, but now all bets are off. So,
Yeah, and the key there is again just showing people that you're not going to hire people who aren't actually actors. This is people that are in the film are actually in the film,
yeah.
and if you have some recognition, a recognizable name, they go, "Oh, okay, so I have seen a movie that this person would be in," and if I'm imagining going to a movie theater, I can imagine that person in a movie.
But also, if you do have a recognizable name and face, I mean, that is only going to help you as an indie filmmaker because these investors want to go to the red carpet. They want to go have fun and do something that they've never done before. So even in my deck, I made sure to have pictures of like film festival premieres and red carpets and awards shows and just be like, this could happen if we pull this
Yeah.
off, and everything works out the way that we're pitching it will work out. This could be you. You could see your name on the big screen.
Yeah, and I've heard people say like, you don't want your investor document to be too like salesy, but I actually think that's the opposite of like this is meant to sell the film. I mean, you can put the risk that, it's risky to invest in movies. You can put that as a disclaimer, but it's like putting a disclaimer on like a, prescription medicine. It's like, you want to sell the benefits of this film. You want to sell what the benefits are, and all those things are the things that you're getting people excited about. And things could be different. Like some people don't give a crap about who's in the movie. They just want the money. And that's
Mhm.
fine. But you want that in there to just sort of give people the idea and the sense that this is a movie that's going to be finished. It's going to have a premiere. There's going to be a premiere. There's going to be some level of fame around it. Depending on your level of involvement, you will be part of that.
Yeah, and my documents are always like very much within the brand or the style of the movie. And so
Right.
whether it's the investor deck or my creative like director pitch deck, it's still the same like key artwork that's in the background. It doesn't just feel like a Word document. It's not black and white. It's colorful. There are plenty of images. There's plenty of things to just keep you interested and hooked as you go through this while keeping the text as minimal as possible and just making sure that you still have the right information that you need
Yep.
to get across to the investor. Yeah.
Check it with your lawyer ahead of time too to make sure that you're not presenting anything that you shouldn't present. And I know it sounds pedantic and it sounds weird, but it's like one of those things where you just don't need the horror story of having someone come back and say that they were swindled. They didn't want to invest, and then they bring it up to securities and so on, and suddenly you're in trouble. So like, it's always good to run everything by your lawyer before you actually like make it a public facing document. But it also is meant, again, it's meant to stimulate that discussion. So like, your paperwork is the thing that's going to be the devil in the details. That's where the due diligence is going to come in, where people are going to like check the contracts, check all the subscription agreements and everything like that to make it, to see if this is something that makes sense.
Yeah, and between subscription agreements, and they may want to know or see the articles of incorporation, making sure that you can't dilute their shares, that all of a sudden they might give you all of this money and then you can take it and run with it, or bring other people on board, and all of a sudden their shares are worth pennies when should be worth dollars. A lot of that is just going to be part of like their due diligence as well. But it's a long road between getting the investor deck, sending out the investor deck to investors, and them actually signing a check and transferring you the money.
Yeah. You have to think of this as like, this is the first step. This is like your first public facing thing that you're putting towards people who have the ability to finance your film, and use it as a conversation starter. Best case scenario is you should be sitting there walking them through it and asking questions, answering questions along the way. Like, you don't want to be sitting there, send it out to 5 people and never hear from it again, because 5 cold emails to 5 people and sending a pitch deck out. It's like, no, you want to be, ideally you're using this as a way to show people this is the movie in its current form. There's no bells and whistles, but we are showing you a little bit of like potential of what it can be. And you brought up good points. It's like, concept art and everything like that sounds like a great idea, but if you lock people into that thought process too soon, then people will say, well, if that's the movie, I either want it or I don't, or I like it or I don't. And if they say like, I don't like that image of that particular thing, then you kind of are locked into it.
Yeah. Rely on their imagination. But I think this is all like super helpful, and I'm glad that we went through what it is to make an investor deck. I think that like this is just a great, key piece of information to have out there, and hopefully it helps people on their journeys as they go through indie development and going after investors themselves. So
Yep.
this has been a lot of fun.
Necessary evils.
Exactly. Yeah. On that note, why don't we call it there, and we'll pick up the discussion too about like creative pitch decks sometime as well. Email us if you have questions about this. This is an ongoing thing, and no deck is sort of made the same way, right? You kind of have to craft it for your movie and for your audience, your specific reader and specific investors that you're going after. But hopefully a lot of this information applies to what you're working on.
Yep. And have fun with it. It's a necessary step. Like, you want to make a movie, you've got to get money for it. And this is one of the, especially in this day and age, you need to have an investor deck that is geared towards private investors. I mean, that's how you got your movie made, right? So you're a success story in this. Investor deck's done properly.
It all worked out. All right. Well,
it all worked out.
Thanks, Anthony. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.